Quasar's virtual scroll. This is going to be a good one. Before we get started, we're going to need a lot of data that we can deal with, and we can basically dummy that data with a little bit of code. So let's say max size here. We want a lot, so let's say 10,000. So that's 10 and then 3 zeros. And then we want to have a list, and we'll call this heavy list because it's going to be heavy with data. And then we'll say for, and I'll say let I is equal to 0. This is basically just a really simple for loop. And we'll use that max size to get our number, and then we'll increment I. Now 10,000 times, I'm going to push onto our heavy list list.push, a very simple object that has a label, and we'll say option with a space, and then we'll add on that the index +1. There we go. So that's going to give us a massive list. Now we can use the virtual scroll component to display that list. And notice that I have a div here rather than a QPage component. That's going to make it a little bit easier to work with some of these examples. All right, Q-virtual-scroll. We need to give it some items to begin with. So items is equal to heavy list. And I want you to note that behind the scenes, virtual scroll is basically doing a for loop for us. So rather than doing v-for, virtual scroll is going to loop over all of our items, and it's going to spit those items out for us. And by the way, this component is designed to work with QList by default, but it also works with Quasar's QTable component. So there is a way to get that working as well, which I'll show you later on in this video. Okay, so we give it all of the items. The next thing it's going to need is some styling. So let's say style is equal to, I'm going to give it a maximum height of, how about we calculate 100 VH, so we get the total height, and we'll subtract a little bit, so maybe just 100 pixels. That'll do, it doesn't have to be perfect. And the other thing I'll do is give it a width. So we'll say that the width is equal to 100 view width. In other words, just the width of the page here. Okay, so by default, it looks a little bit silly. We need to actually give it something to display here. So now we can say template, and inside of there, I will have default. And we'll set that equal to an object because we're going to pluck out of there the item that we're currently on and then the index. So what's happening is behind the scenes, like I said before, it's iterating over every single item and it's passing it through to this template slot, this default slot. And then we're able to basically just spit it out however we like. And by the way, this is a QList component under the hood, so we can also add in separator to add some separators in. All right, since it is a QList, we'll say Q-item inside of there, and a Q-item-section, and then a Q-item-label. You can go ahead and check out the Q-item documentation or the Q-item video if you want to understand what's happening here. But anyway, now we're going to spit out hashtag and then index so that we know the current item that we're on, just to kind of prove to ourselves that it's working. And then also, how about item.label? Now, these need to be uniquely identifiable. So in order to do that, we can give it a key equal to the current index. Let's save it and see if it works. Whoa, that worked really quickly. Now we should be able to scroll it. And there you go. Notice if I keep scrolling that everything looks a little bit it sort of gives us that loading display there. That's because the items haven't even been loaded yet. So what's happening is all of the items above 3,997, all of the items up here haven't actually been loaded yet into the screen. So rather than loading every single item that we have here, and there are 10,000 of them, so it would slow the computer down and consume a lot of RAM, everything above and everything below hasn't actually been loaded. Only what's being displayed has been loaded. And when I say loaded, I mean rendered onto the screen. So only what you see is rendered here. And as we scroll down, the reason we get that kind of that loading visualization is because it's rendering it as we go behind the scenes. How cool is that? This is an insanely useful component if you want performance. Now, just so we can fit some more on here, how about we come in and say dense? There we go. So it works with dense as well. Okay, what else can we do here? Well, everything I've showed you works if it's horizontal. If we say virtual scroll, and I want you to virtual scroll this horizontally, we can say horizontal, save it, Now we get a horizontal virtual scroll. Pretty cool. What else? Well, I want to show you that there's actually more than one possible template that we can use here. And what I mean is rather than just having a Q item, we can have some other components sitting inside there along with the Q item. So how about we come in here and say Q-banner, and we'll use the Q banner component. And what I want to do is say every now and then, like maybe every 5 of these components is going to be a Q banner instead. So how about this? Let's comment that out. We'll scroll down here, and then beneath label, we can say banner, and I want it to be a banner 1 in 5. And we can do that easily by saying I, and then the modular sign, 5 is equal to 0. I believe that's how it works. And now what we can do is just check if it's a banner. And if it's a banner, then we'll use this component. Otherwise, we'll use the Q item component. So that means I can now say v-if, oh, sorry, we want the v-if up here, don't we? v-if item.banner. So if this is a banner item, I want you to spit it out. Otherwise, so v-else, just use the Q item component. Now let's copy this, paste it in there, and just see what we get now. All right, looks a little bit silly. You can see that the Q banners are actually showing in there, but now we need to add a little bit of styling. Class is equal to background dash primary, and then we'll also add a bit of padding here, Q dash padding Y dash extra large, to differentiate it a little bit. Yeah, I wanted to show you as well that these can be different sizes. So let's scroll down and notice that it still works. How cool is that? Now, really what I should do is ensure that the Q banner is distinguishable from the Q item. So we'll also give it a key. So we'll come up here and give it a key. Now, the reason it's complaining is because we now have a clash of keys. So what we actually have to do is say here, for example, A plus the index, and then here we could say B plus the index when we're doing the keys. And there we go, that's going to work. And it is pretty important that you get that right, that you add the keys in correctly. Otherwise, you can run into some pretty funky problems. And I believe those problems tend to crop up, especially with things like sorting inside of your components. All right, let's move on to tables, using this with a table component. And we can do that by simply saying the type is equal to table. And now VirtualScroll is going to work with a table. So coming down here, we need to model some table data. And I'll just do some default rows. We'll say rows is equal to an array. Let's do an example object with a name equal to Luke and an email equal to luke@quasarcast.com. And then I can add in my family, my girlfriend, and my 3 dogs. So here, double click, Control D, Shannon, and then my 3 dogs, Panda, double click, Control D, Lily, double click, Control D, Min. All right, save it. Now we've got all of those rows, and we're going to use those rows in order to create our list. And we'll also need some columns. So const columns is equal to an array, and we'll have one that's got a name equal to name, and then the field will be equal to name. And this one's going to be very similar, except it's for email. All right, so we've got a bunch of columns available. Let's change that to columns plural. What else do we need? Well, all of this looks good. We just need to change the way that we push onto the heavy list. Now, the way they do this in the Quasar docs is to say array.prototype.push.apply. So essentially what we're doing is we're saying, hey, take the push method for arrays and then apply it to heavy list. Now, I don't know why they wrote the code this way in the documentation, but that's why I'm showing it to you here. It might be a performance thing. The way I think I would usually write this, and please do feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, is heavylist.push, and since that can accept any number of parameters, I would just spread the rows directly on there like this. So maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that would work too. So this might be a performance thing. Anyway, let's save that. Not going to work properly because currently it's using a list under the hood. Let's change it to using a table. Scrolling up. We won't need the separator anymore. And one thing I'll add is virtual scroll item size. We want to let it know the size of each item. And inside of a table, I happen to know that that is 48 pixels. Save that. Next, I think we might just get rid of all of this and then do it from scratch. Maybe we'll just get rid of everything inside of there and we'll keep the template part. Yeah, that'll be good. But instead of item, let's change that to row so it's a little bit more obvious what it is, or row singular. And then we can say here just a normal table row component, and we'll set the key equal to index. So that's the first row, and then we'll give it some table data as well. Then I can say hashtag symbol, and then whatever the index is. Copy paste that down. And this one we can say v-4 and just iterate over all of the columns. So column in columns, and this might be a little bit overkill considering that we only have 2 columns, but I'm going to do it anyway. And we'll set a key here, which will be equal to the current index plus, we'll let a dash in there, plus the column dot name. This needs to be unique. And I might just copy that and do something similar up here for the ID. So how about we say index, and we'll set the column name here equal to ID. Yeah, I think that'll do. All right, so things are starting to work. Now we just need to make sure we can feed through the data. This is really exciting. Look at this. This is a Q table component. You can imagine using this in the real world. A table component where you can just scroll through it and it is lightning fast, even when you have thousands and thousands and thousands of rows of data. I love Quasar. Moving on, we have here row, so we'll jump into the current row that we're on, and then we can say column dot field. So basically, on the current row, using the columns field, pull the data out. Let's save it, and there we go. We don't need the hashtag here. And I think that's going to work. Yeah, very nice. All right, what else can we do? Well, chances are you're going to want a table header and a table footer. So let's use another template here for the table's header and footer. Template, and how about we do before first? So in other words, before this default slot, I want you to insert something. And we'll say here t head, and we'll give it a class equal to text dash left because I want to ensure that all of the text is aligned to the left. I think that'll just make it look a bit better than centered. And then we say tr to have a table row, th to have a table head, and let's call that index. Then we've also got another th, and then inside of there we can just say the name of the column, column dot name. I also want a key on this one, so let's say v-4 is equal to col in columns. I forgot that part. We need to actually pull them out. Column in columns. I like to use the full word a lot of the time rather than just col. I don't know why. This is a habit I've gotten into. People like to shorten things a lot. There are exceptions like ID, but in general, I don't really like shortening my own code. I like to use the full word. I know that's not like a common thought and honestly not really a common practice, but it's a habit I've gotten into that I quite like. All right, anywho, 1 dash dash and then plus col dot name. And the reason I'm saying 1 dash dash here is to make sure I can differentiate this table head from any value that we end up with here. So this could end up being 1 dash the column name, but if we add that second dash here, it means that it's not going to collide with what we have here. All right, save it. Oh, that should be column. And there we go. Index, name, email, all showing up there. And now we can let's just check that it does scroll still. Yep. Now we can just copy this, paste it down. I might actually copy all of that and paste it down here underneath the default template. And we'll call this one after. And let's see what's going to be different. Honestly, not a lot. We don't want this to clash, so we'll change that to a 2 and save it. Now we have a header at the top, and scrolling down, we have a header at the bottom. Well, it's not a header, it's a footer at the bottom. All right, what else can we do? Oh, whoever you are out there in the world, I bet you've run into the problem where you want to have a sticky header and a sticky footer in your tables. And if you haven't had it, then it's probably going to happen at some point in your career as a web developer. You can do that and do that using QVirtualScroll. Check this out. If we come down here, we can add some styles in, and it's actually surprisingly not very much styling required. And let's set the language here equal to Sass, since that seems to be the language of styling these days. then I can give this a class equal to tHead-sticky. This is going to be a sticky for the head. And we'll say table row. And inside of that table row, we're going to grab everything. Now, copy paste that down because we want basically the exact same thing, but for footer. So let's just say tFoot sticky. And now we can apply some styles, and these are going to apply for everything inside of the row for the footer and the row for the header. So I want the position to be equal to sticky to make sure it sticks into place. Opacity is going to be equal to 1 to ensure that it's a solid color. And I find this to be important. Otherwise, when things overlap with your sticky header, sometimes it's a little bit transparent and it can be disorienting and it doesn't quite look right. So opacity equal to 1. We also want a z-index equal to 1. That's going to ensure that it appears on top. Then we'll say that the background is black so that it's very obvious against a white background. So then we've got all of the others white, and then the black header and footer is going to make it just stand out a little bit more. Now, next, we need to make sure that the header is at the top and the footer is at the bottom. So we say tHead-sticky. And then we can say table row last child. So I want you to grab the last child, in other words, the one at the very bottom. And within that, grab everything. Then we just say bottom 0. Not bottom, top 0. All right, we can copy paste that down now and say tFoot sticky. And specifically, I want to grab the first child in the foot, and we'll say bottom 0. I think that's everything we need. So now we've got tHead and tFoot sticky. Let's copy tHead sticky, scroll up, and we're going to put that in here. So we're applying that class to the head, and then coming down here, we'll do the same thing for the foot. tFoot sticky. Oh, and that shouldn't be tHead, that should be tFoot. Goodness, I almost missed that. I probably would have been debugging that for ages. And there we go. We've got the head. And as we scroll down, that should stick, but it isn't. And the foot is only kind of working. So what have I done here? Now, thank goodness for video editing, because I just spent ages fumbling around trying to figure this out. I forgot to put those dots there. Save it. And there we go. Now we've got our sticky headers and footers. How cool is that? And one thing that you're probably going to want to do, just to ensure that everything is as accurate as possible, is Control-Shift-I, find out what the height of this cell is, and I can see it in there. Next to that purple TH on the right side, you can see it's 48 pixels high. This might be a little bit small for you, but I can see that that is in fact 48 pixels high. And on the bottom one, it is 32. So we got 48 and 32. I'm going to put that here in a comment, 48 and 32. So what we can do now is give the virtual scroller a little bit of extra information, and if it knows how high the header is, the sticky header, and how high the sticky footer is, it can do a better job. So now we can say here, virtual scroll sticky size start. It's probably the longest prop ever, but it is insanely helpful. Now we can set that to 48 because the start one here is 48. And then we can say sticky size end as well. And this one is, I wrote 4 there, but I'm pretty sure that was actually 32. Yep. So let's get rid of that comment, save it. You might not even notice the difference, but that is going to work slightly better now. Okay, next we're going to talk about scroll targeting. Now this is like very specific stuff. If you want to jump into the nitty-gritty of what all of this is about, especially scrolling with the QScroll component, and if you want to understand how it works under the hood, then go ahead and check out the QScroll area video. And I'm going to show you right now, though, how to use virtual scroll inside of a QScroll area component, because this might be a problem that you'll run into. Let's go ahead and create a Q-scroll-area, and we'll just get this set up first. So how about we give it an ID equal to virtual scroll area. We're going to use that in a second so that the virtual scroller can know the area that it's inside of. In fact, let's put it in there now. We'll come down here and we'll select everything and then hold Alt and press up to put it inside of the QScroll area component and move on to the next thing. I also want to give it a style equal to height maybe 400 pixels. And since the height is on the scroll area, I'm now going to remove it from the virtual scroll component. Save it, and let's move on to the next thing. Now, it looks like that's doing stuff, so I'm just going to close this out for a second. Yeah, I think it just loaded the entire list. That's why it took forever. Now I can say bar-style to add some styling to the bar here for the scroll area. And we'll give that a z index equal to 1. Actually, I want to show you these problems first. So let's get rid of that and actually hit those problems. Now next, and this is the important part, we want to say scroll-target and set that equal to basically this ID here. So we're going to find this scroll area, and specifically inside of the scroll area, I want to find the element with a class of scroll. All right, now I can jump back into our server. Let's see if this works. And it looks like it is working. There we go. So if you didn't have this scroll target here, that wouldn't work properly. In fact, you probably wouldn't even be able to scroll this at all. So that's why we have the scroll target. Now notice though that it's hiding behind here, and I can't really grab the scroll bar now. And that's because the Z index of this top header and the Z index of the footer as well is making them go above the scroll bar. So what we can actually do is set a Z index on the bar to make sure that it appears on top. So let's say bar-style to tap into the styling of the bar. Then we can say Z index is equal to 1. Let's see if that worked, and now I can grab it. But it's not very visible, so how about we give it some color as well? I'm thinking background color of black. Save it. Sorry, we're on the bar. We're not actually on the thumb. So this is called the thumb, whereas this is called the bar. So now we can see the track before we start scrolling. All right, so bar, track, you can call that whatever you want. I kind of think of it as a track in my mind, but the language here is bar. The other thing we have is thumb style, which is basically this thing here that we grab onto with our thumb. And we'll give that a background color equal to something a bit more obvious. So let's just say red so it really stands out. And we might need to give it an opacity. Yeah, if you wanted to have a fuller opacity, what you could do is say opacity is equal to 1, depending on your use case. Let's see if that works. Yeah, actually, you know what? I like the opacity that they give us by default. Yeah, I think that looks a bit better. But you get the idea. And there's some other things you can do here, like add some margining at the top to ensure that the scroll bar sits a little bit further below. So you can change the styling to however you like it. And the last thing I want to show you is a method that allows us to scroll to any item inside of this list. Check this out. Q-button, and we can say label is equal to, how about scroll to 1000. So we'll scroll to number 1000. And then when you click on this at click, we're going to grab the virtual scroll component and we're going to call scroll to so that we can jump to 1000. So I'll show you how we can do that. Ref is equal to, and we'll give that a name of table virtual scroll. I think that'll do. Table virtual scroll. Now, in order for that ref to exist, that reference to the QVirtualScroll, we come down here and we say const table virtual scroll is equal to ref. We'll import ref and save it. So now that's automatically going to latch onto this component here. Then we can say when you click on this button, grab the virtual scroll component. All right, so I've pasted that in there. And I want you to call scroll to, and then we'll feed it 1000. Now let's see if that works. And it does. How cool is that? Scrolls us directly to 1000, which is really, really handy, especially since we're using virtual scroll here, it's not obvious how you would do that, considering that this element hasn't even been rendered yet. So basically, this gives us that functionality back again. So we get the best of both worlds. We get virtual scrolling, and we get the ability to jump to any place inside of this list. Really insanely cool. And one more thing I wanted to mention before wrapping up this video is that all of this works with asynchronous components. So Quasar inside of the documentation has a pretty involved example of how you can use asynchronous components inside of a QVirtualScroll. So essentially what you could do is you can make it so that when you scroll down, it actually asynchronously fetches the components that are required. And the example they use, I believe, is a chat application. So if you had a chat app that needs to then fetch all of the responses from the back end, you could then grab the responses and grab the component if you're using like an SSR application and basically load that component asynchronously. It's pretty amazing what you can do with Vue and the QVirtualScroll component. So I'll save that one for a future video because it's probably going to be a very, very involved example. But hey, I hope you enjoyed this one. I certainly had a blast. I'll see you in a future video.